Hi, Chael. This is Regu. In his most recent interview, Tony Ferguson told Ariel that, unlike any other fighter before him, he will be taking Khabib down and putting him on his back. Do you see this happening? Do you see Tony, a Division II national champion, actually pulling this off against an AKA trained Sambo world champion? Or would you bet against that?
Uh, a little bit of a tough one, and I have to tell you, Khabib's grappling is wrestling based. That's not Sambo, what he's out there doing. And there's a couple of guys who are proud of the country of Russia. They're just very proud of it. And Sambo is one of their national sports. It's what the Russian military uses as a way of tipping their hat and paying a patriotic respect. They say they're doing Sambo. Sambo is very close to not even being a real sport, in fairness. It is not recognized by any governing body with any level of reputability. It is not, has never been, and never will be in consideration for the Olympic Games. That's how you know when a sport is truly real. If you do not have recognition by the International Olympic Committee, you're likely in a fake sport. Now, Sambo is very effective when you're wearing a gi and a jacket, right? I mean, it's kind of like being in a sword fight. You can have a sword fight as long as you have a sword and the other guy has a sword. How many guys do you run into carrying swords? Okay, Sambo's the same thing, but he is from Dagestan, and he grew up wrestling. He grew up in wrestling rooms with world and Olympic champions, so he's got a very good wrestling base. You must understand that, because when you talk about a comparison to a Division II wrestling champion in Tony Ferguson, and you're trying to compare that to a Sambo world champion. Where the hell, Sambo world champion? Where are the world championships held? And who's, I could hold a Sambo world championship right here in front of you guys. And there's nobody to come out and say that it wasn't real. There is no recognized body for, I mean, I think that's important, not for nothing, but one of the histories of mixed martial arts was to get all the martial arts together and just find out what's real and what's not. So the gyms that are practicing fake BS and building kids' confidence based on nothing to take their father's money every 30 days electronically, okay, the reoccurring business, would stop doing it. And kids could actually go and learn something that would work should they run into a situation they need to protect themselves. Sambo has got to fall into that category. It's garbage at the highest of levels, and it's not what Khabib uses. You can't do Sambo without a jacket. There's no such thing as no-gi Sambo, unlike jiu-jitsu that has gi and no-gi. I just have to clear the air on that. But Khabib's wrestling and the things he picked up and learned along the way, this guy's magnificent. Is that enough to take down a Division II national champion? Well, I'll tell you this. Tony does get taken down a lot. So if I was to base it on previous fights that I've seen, I do think that Khabib would take Tony down. He cannot do it at will. He would not do it all night long. He would not do it with several misses being slipped in there as well. But the great ones will throw 5 and 6 things at you, just hoping that one sticks. Khabib's a great one. So that's okay. I feel that the bigger, and Tony also, by the way, doesn't mind being on bottom. Don't forget the night that he won his championship. He did that from the bottom. I mean, Tony was born and raised in the briar patch. Don't think for a second that he's scared about going to the bottom. That's what makes Tony such a problem. He'll fight everywhere that fight. If you told Tony, hey, you got to fight Khabib tonight. Oh, by the way, we've got one caveat in the fight. You're going to start it down. Khabib's going to be right on top of you. That's how we're going to start it. You don't go to your corner. He doesn't go to, you start the fight down. Do you accept, Tony? Will you sign here? Tony will sign that and walk to the ring right now. So before you have any misconceptions that Tony Ferguson gives a damn about being on the bottom, make sure you understand that. I want to reverse your question, though. And I want to tell you this. Do I think Khabib can take Tony down? That's what you asked. Yes, I do. Do I also think that Tony can take Khabib down? Yes, I do. And for me as a viewer, as a fan, as someone that's followed Khabib along this journey, that would be very interesting for me. I would very much like to see what happens when Khabib gets down. What's his style from down there? Is he going to look for submissions and he secretly has submissions? Is he going to look for the referee to stand him up and just try to stalemate a guy out? Is he a guy that likes to scramble? Stand up to his feet? I would be very interested to see. Does he strike from the... I don't know the answer to these things. I trust that nobody else does either. It's a position we haven't seen Khabib in.
Hey, Chael, it's Ben here. I have a question for you. So Conor McGregor went 2 weight classes up to fight Nate Diaz. How do you think Khabib would do if he went 2 weight classes up and fought Israel Adesanya?
So I would love to see Khabib go outside of his weight class, and for reasons that have not fully been explained to me, he doesn't. I'll give you an example. Khabib has always been dead set at 155. You must be 155. I'll fight anybody. They got to come to 155. George St. Pierre, you're more than welcome. I respect you, but you got to come to my weight class. Things like this have been said. So he's been pretty clear that he wants to fight at 155, which does surprise me because this champ thing is very real right now. And Khabib is such a big guy. And Khabib's even raised his hand when we've talked about this 165-pound weight class. So what in the hell's the difference if you go to 170, particularly when you're Khabib and he's missed weight a number of times, which makes him a welterweight. On 2 separate occasions, he's not fought at the specified weight class of 155, which makes him a welterweight. I believed he wouldn't go up because Islam is at 170 and that's his teammate and he doesn't want to fight him. I made a video on that and quickly got corrected by you guys. No, Islam's at 155. So I don't know what his reservation about going up to 170 is. But he does not appear to be interested in that. I can tell you in the training room, just from stories, he goes with all those guys and way bigger. He used to train with Ed Ruth on a daily basis. He used to train and spar rounds with Luke Rockhold. He's got no problem going with these bigger guys. There's something that he is locked in about competing. He wants to do it at 155. I hope he reveals that to us. I would like to know the answer. As far as him going up and taking on Israel Adesanya, I would tend to think that that's just a little too much size. I would tend to think I would be compelled to see that fight. And I think that you can say as many nice things as you want about Khabib, and you would still probably be short on the praise. He deserves it. I just feel, for the first time in the history of MMA, Whitaker versus Adesanya will fulfill providing us with the answer to the question of who is the best fighter in the sport. So many times we'll see a very good fighter put on a very good performance and then crown them the best. We've seen this from the beginning of time. We saw Mike Tyson knocking out tomato cans and declaring him the best time after time. I think that in a very rare occasion, you actually have the 2 best guys, and they're not just fighting for king of middleweight and a division and an undisputed title and pride, nationalistic pride. I think that they're also fighting to figure out who the absolute best in the world is. So if you were to ask me how Khabib would do against I feel like you asked an unfair question putting him in there with Adesanya.
Hey champ, so Conor versus Khabib. I know Khabib said no and his team is saying no. How much power does Conor or Dana has to actually make this happen? Thanks, big fan.
Yeah, the truth is none of those guys have power, including Khabib. For some reason, you win a championship, you think you're holding walk away now. You will see champions that every champion wants to do this as a ploy for attention. I'm going to do one more fight and then I'm done. I could name them, and they're guys that I even respect tremendously. But there's a piece of holding that belt where you want to be begged constantly to stick around. There's also a piece to that identity where nobody ever wants to leave the sport. Ever. There will never be a day where somebody wants to leave the sport. This is not a business like that. It's much like Hollywood or acting. You're never done with the business, but one day you'll wake up and find out the business is done with you. Okay, that's how this works. So none of these guys really want to go, but there's guys that they just don't want to fight. There's guys that they're scared of. They will say who you have no ability. You have no power. Conor's been selling his power in this industry from the day he got here. But the great trick that he did is he made you guys believe he has no power. Khabib has no power. He can put whoever he wants in the front row. He can make videos with guys around what's that got to do with the UFC? Khabib thinks he has power. Conor thinks he has power. Now, if you're sitting in the middle, you got to go deal with these knuckleheads. And if push comes to shove, you let them know who has the power. And it's not going to be one of them. Point I'm trying to get at, I think you asked me specifically about the word power. These guys are fantastic athletes and they're fantastic fighters, but they need to understand they are nothing more than that. They are interchangeable with a million other guys out there. Do you want to do this or don't you? Oh, and by the way, I have you under contract, so you're not going to go anywhere else. And if I don't want to pay you anymore, I don't have to. By law, and the Supreme Court will back me. I mean, how much? You want to talk about power? Let's get into it. Conor McGregor versus Khabib is a fun fight. I would also tell you this, it would be a different fight. I was at the very first one. And Conor, regardless of outcome and regardless of the way that story has been rewritten, much like his fight with Floyd Mayweather, did a very good job in that fight. He did a very good job. He stopped Khabib early on with some. They don't have wrestling in Ireland. Okay, Ireland isn't represented at the Olympic Games in wrestling. Dagestan dominates the Olympic Games in specifically wrestling. Now, Khabib out wrestled him. I get it. I saw it. Khabib did a fantastic job. To act as though Conor did not, and to act as though Khabib does not have a unique feel that somebody like Conor, who's a student of the sport, could go out and feel one time and regardless of outcome, come back and do better the second time is false. Conor could do better the second time. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean he gets into the 5th round? Does that mean he makes it to a decision before you go to the judges' card? Does he win 2 rounds? Does he win 3? I mean, there's all sorts of questions where he could do better, but you don't get a different outcome. But that's one of the reasons that you want to see the match again. No, to your question, neither one of those guys has power. Those 3 little letters were still the fastest growing business and sport in the world long before Khabib was showing up, long after Khabib will be here, long before Conor, and long after Conor.
Uncle Chael, I'm a big fan, as you can tell. My question is about Conor McGregor. I think he will return to the cage sometime in the next 6 to 8 months, hopefully. But my question is, do you think he will have that same drive and same passion that he had in his 2013 to 2016 run when he became a double champion? A lot of these guys that are in the same weight class as him and potential opponents, they've gotten a lot better. Has he gotten better? And will he have that same drive?
All right, so a lot of Conor talk, which I find interesting. Conor's doing something to keep his name out there, and I think he must be doing a very good job. I digress. Let me refocus. There was a couple of parts to that. First off, where is Conor's motivation? Look, that was called into question by his own coach, John Kavanagh, who said, I will not train him again and I will not support him fighting again unless he can come to me and tell me why. Why are we doing this? Is it about the money? Is it about ego? Is it about championship? Do you have the drive? Are you going to be in here? Are you going to do everything that I ask of you as you did before? Coach Kavanagh said this very, very publicly. About 3 months after he said that, he went back out and spoke to the media and said, I have my answer. I love what I'm seeing out of Conor. I now know why we're doing this. We're doing this because he loves the sport. He wants to rebuild, reclimb, and get back to the top. Okay, great. Whether he ever does it or not, we at least have our answer that he's now being busy, he's now being disciplined, he's now being in the gym. When I see Conor, which is a rare occasion, but I must tell you, he looks fantastic. I mean, he does not look like a fighter who quit fighting. He does not look like an adult, 30 years old, who's now sitting on the couch. He looks like a professional athlete who's been working his ass off. That's what he looks like to me. Now, I know there's plenty of in-between and plenty of distractions. Welcome to Conor's new life. That's just the way that things are going to be. But when you do ask, could he come back? I mean, I have to remind you, because so many people forget how good he was when he left. This is a guy who had 3 world title belts, an interim title, a 45-pound title, a 55-pound title. People always forget he was also the interim champion. He's got 3 world championship belts. He leaves the sport, goes into a different sport, takes on the greatest to have ever done it in a fight that no commission with any level of responsibility would ever sanction. Turned out they got a commission with no level of responsibility to sanction it, and then fought the son of a bitch for a half an hour. This guy is good. This guy's as special as they come. Oh, and by the way, did Khabib kick his ass? Yeah, you bet he did. Khabib kicked his ass. Oh, and by the way, Khabib's lost 1 round in his entire life, and it was to Conor, who hadn't even been doing the sport. As a matter of fact, he had forayed into a different sport. I offer you that because I feel that answering your question of will he be as good as he once was is a forgetting that Conor won a world title in 11 seconds the first time. He needed 7.5 minutes to win it the second time. He needed 8 minutes to win the interim championship. There was a gap between Conor McGregor and the field. Any way you want to do it. You can like Conor, not like Conor. One's got nothing to do with the other. Let's say he's worse, which would make sense. I would subscribe to the fact that if you're not doing something, you're probably getting worse, particularly when you're a drunk. He's still the best. I mean, how much do you think a guy fell? Even more? He's still the best. Even more? He's still the best. You put that in conjunction with what Nate Diaz did. Nate Diaz just took 3 years off. He's not a drunk. He lived the lifestyle. He went in the gym. He didn't fly all around the world. He went to practice every single day. I've never seen Nate Diaz fighting better. Nate Diaz, his whole career, he's never fought better than he fought after taking 3 years off. comes in against a world champion and dominates him for 15 minutes. I've never seen him look better. So when you're confronted with those things, yes, history says that it's not going to be a fantastic night for Conor. He may win, but it's not going to be a fantastic night. You do have some of these rare exceptions. And for me, if anyone should be given the benefit of the doubt, if we're willing to extend benefit of the doubt to George St. Pierre, well, he's the greatest of all time, and he's got belts in different weight classes, and he's amazing. True, true, and true. But doesn't that philosophy also apply to Conor McGregor?
Hi, Chael. I noticed the other day that you mentioned in one of your videos about the Super Fight Championship and how you used to love it back in the early UFCs, and I used to love it. I thought it was a great idea. Do you feel that this new BMF title that Masvidal and Diaz could be that equivalent to the Super Fight title in this day and age? And do you feel that they shouldn't do it as a one-off, that they should do it, once a year or, something like that? Just wanted your opinion on it. Really big fan of the show.
No, listen, this has to be a one-off. And I wish it wasn't that way. I wish they would have gone with the super fight. Look, the BMF has 2 glaring problems, okay? Now, it's got 7 really positive, but let's look at the problem. First off, BMF are initials. Now, your lowly hero, Chael, over here, known as the greatest SHIT talker in all of sports, the closest I've ever come to using a 4-letter word publicly is the spelling of SHIT a moment ago. I've never used profanity. And therefore, I can never talk about the BMF belt without saying BMF because I can't come out and say what it stands for. That's a problem. From a marketing standpoint, that's a tremendous problem. For a longevity standpoint, for brand intrigation, that's a huge problem. You cannot go on SportsCenter and even feint a 4-letter word, let alone say it. You can't even simulate something dirty. So what are you going to do when you have the BMF title? And somebody goes, what's BMF stand for? See the problem? Now, the other side of the coin, you got 2 gangsters. You have 2 heels. You have 2 bad guys. 2 guys with black hats coming out. When's the last time that happened? You probably go back to WrestleMania 13 years ago and tell me about the time that The Rock walked out to take on Stone Cold Steve Austin, and you'd probably be right. This is a promoter's dream. This is a fan's dream. This is a marketing dream. So if you want to add to the marketing that is a rarity at best, has not been cloned, has not been duplicated, will attempt to be imitated, but it's going to take us another decade and a half to get to this point, and you want to spice it up a little bit by putting something profane such as a BMF title on the line because that's what the fighters have declared that they're fighting for, it works, but it only works for one night.
All right, Uncle Chael, this is from Ryan and Little Harper out here in Kansas City. A little bit off topic here, but what, in your opinion, is the hardest team sport and why?
Well, first off, hello, and hello to Little Harper. Did a tremendous cameo in that video. The hardest team sport. And I don't know that those go hand in hand. And that sounds very condescending coming from a guy with cage fighting. I don't mean it to sound with any kind of macho-ness, but team sports they're just not as difficult. What's difficult? What's tough to do? For me, it's only one thing, cardio. Are you getting tired or not? Are you getting a level to exhaustion and fatigue where you would rather quit, but you find a reason to push through? If you're doing that, you're a tough guy. If you're not doing that, you're not in a tough sport. Simple as that. One isn't better than the other, by the way. But to try to brand yourself tough is kind of difficult, right? You'll see a lot of that handed to football because they're running into one another. No considerations to the fact that they're covered in Kevlar when they're doing it. Oh, and by the way, the entire game has 7 minutes of action in a 4-hour span. Oh, and by the way, there's special teams and the offense, and you're getting pulled out by the... Oh, and halfway through, you're going to take a 30-minute break. You're going to come out and tell a guy like me that that's tough? Oh, my God. Come on. A 30-minute break? That's what I take in between workouts each day. They call it a game. And for some reason, the fans, they let them get so goddamn drunk, they'll even sign off and say it's entertaining. You take the alcohol out of football, you take the fans out of football. In fairness, not at all to do with your question. When you want to talk about what's tough, though, I would have to think that it would be something that gets your heart rate up. You want to know who I've always respected? I'll hear about how tough a hockey player is. Oh, look, he's playing hockey. He got his tooth knocked out. Well, he's an idiot, for one. If he couldn't slip out of the way, he's untalented. If he didn't have a mouth guard in, he's just not very bright. So if a hockey player loses a tooth, and you want to say he's a tough guy instead of a dum-dum, that's on you. You want to know who I respected as athletes? Marathon runners. I was on the Jim Rome show, and I got asked that very question. I was sitting next to Brendan Ademajahu, who had won a Super Bowl championship, sitting next to a basketball player who had won an NBA title. And we're all asked that question. And they were very sweet and they were very nice. And they said, oh, the MMA fighters are the toughest guys out there, followed by hockey, followed by football. It was very sweet. I'm sitting in the middle. They put me over. But it wasn't my answer. Yes, if you want to talk about who could beat up who, you just want to do it on the most basic of playground. Of course it's the MMA fighter. What are we having a discussion about? But if you want to talk about tough, who I respect marathon runners. Because it comes back to the definition that I just laid out for you. I want to know somebody who is so tired that they want to quit, but for whatever reason, they don't. Now, in MMA, you've got a pretty good reason to not quit. Because a guy's coming at you full speed with punches and kicks and elbows and knees. In marathon running, just stop. Nothing will happen. Nobody will hurt you. Nobody will attack you. Nobody will laugh at you. It is a personal choice. When I am tired, do I have what it takes in here? I don't think this is strength. I've never thought this is strength. I think this is strength. You're not going to impress me if you're strong here. You will impress me if you're strong here. And I've always thought some of those long distance runners that is an entire battle of am I tough enough to put one foot in front of the other? Or do I want to just stop with absolutely no repercussion? In fact, a benefit of which my heart rate slows down. I grab some water, something to eat, and I start to rest and feel good. I've always respected them. So I guess I'm trying to think of your thought as you said. I'm kind of inclined to lean towards something around track and field, something that would get your heart rate up, because that's very hard to do in team sports, right? I mean, baseball is a very talented sport, but it's a very lazy man's game. Golf should not be considered a sport. Golf should be considered an activity. Something that you go out, you don't get dirty. Oh, and by the way, you don't even break a sweat. That shouldn't be considered sport. You look at basketball, boy, what a great life. That's fun. You're playing indoors. You're never out in the rain. You're never out in the snow like rugby and soccer, some of these other team sports that are rough and tumble. But as far as tough and team sport, that's a tough one. That's why you have the teammates. If the going gets tough, tag one of them in.